meeting started. Okay, it is 6:33. I'm going to call the Castle Hills City Council work session to order and determine if a quorum is present. A quorum is present. The mayor will not be joining us tonight, so I'll be stepping in for him. We're going to have the invocation by city manager.
Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for the members of council that are gathered here, and we just pray that you would give them wisdom, Lord, and clarity of mind as they make decisions, or not make decisions necessarily, but are guided in discussions for some significant issues facing the city of Castle Hills. Lord, I pray for the city, especially for our police, our fire department, Lord, as they go out and go through their daily tasks, and just pray for our residents, and just thank you for this opportunity to serve. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Next, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. Chief Siemens, you want to lead us in that? Thank you, Chief. First, we're going to have some acknowledgments and recognitions. I don't know if any of our other council members have anything worth noting. One thing that I did want to add is that we're going to have the lighting of the lights December 5th at 6:30 at the Commons, and I encourage everybody to come out there and join us. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I believe we're even going to have some snow. Mr. Gregory?
I just want to take note, another member of Castle Hills died the other day. She had been in the Wedgewood for many years and was dislocated with the fire, and she was living over at the retirement home over there, Patricia Gant. She fell in her room, and a rib, broke 3 ribs, and one went and destroyed her lung. And she and I just won a bridge tournament a few months ago. She was a wonderful lady, and she was about 93 years old.
All right, our condolences are definitely with her family. Okay, well, first we're going to have the citizens to be heard on non-agenda items. This is our first true workshop meeting, so due to the amount of items we have on here, it's going to be just citizens to be heard on non-agenda items. If there's anything that you would like to discuss with us, feel free to reach out to a council member after the meeting or at your convenience. That being said, I think Minnie's grabbing the attendance sheet or the sign-in sheet, and we'll see if we have anybody signed up. Okay, Minnie's saying we don't have anybody signed up. First on the, I'm going to pull agenda item 7 and move agenda items. I'm actually going to pull agenda item 6 and 7 and move up agenda item 13 up for discussion with a little bit of attention to the city staff so they don't have to be here any longer than they have to. So on that note, this agenda item 13 is discussion on the plan to initiate online permit applications. I'd like to invite City Council Member McLinn and City Manager Vanderwally for their input.
Sure. I actually have Louis Zamrone here, our Code Compliance Officer. Louis, do you want to step up to the podium and just kind of give them the plan for where we're going with putting our permits online? Thanks.
Yes, sir. Good evening, everybody. I'll make this as brief as possible. Currently, we're looking at 2 options to put the permitting online. One of them is called My Permits Now. The other one's called iWorks. I will be getting a hold of both of those vendors and having them give us a presentation to see what the more robust environment is. I can tell you right now in preliminary research on that, My Permits Now is simply based just with the permits, so it makes it a little bit untenable as far as across the departments of the city. And iWorks, I have personal experience with iWorks. iWorks is interdepartmental. It's extremely accessible. It's web-based. It's cost-efficient. And I believe that that's probably going to be a little bit more of an option for us, but I want both of these companies to have an opportunity to give staff a presentation to see what they can do. I'm hoping to have, I've spoken to iWorks already, and that vice president out there is very eager to put up a demonstration for us. I'll be reaching out to my permits tomorrow, hopefully, and getting that same, hopefully the same kind of response from them. And we can get some presentations done this month and present something to you in January.
Perfect. Thank you, Louis. I just want to add that I think this is extremely important because I've been in the office and I see that Janet and Kit are sitting down and they pop right back up as soon as somebody walks in the window. So anything we can do to help them be a little more productive and focus on what they need to and make y'all's job easier I think is a great idea.
Yes, sir. And we're also trying to make, quite frankly, the code compliance aspect of the city government a little bit more user-friendly for the code compliance officer, as well as Public Works. iWorks is interdepartmental, like I had discussed. Sometimes I'm out there trying to check permits, and sometimes the VPN is down or the VPN server is down. I can't get on and I can't check these permits. So I don't know what's going on in the field. If I call the permits department and they're busy, I'm not going to get an answer. And I really can't do enforcement until I have all those facts. iWorks is web-based, so we don't have to deal with VPNs or dedicated servers, and we can just go in there. And the same with Public Works. And there's also a citizen contact component to it, and we can discuss that. I think we were going to discuss that on another agenda item anyway. And I can address that at that time.
So I guess this is a good time to discuss the topic of prioritization. And one of the things I'm trying to establish is kind of a prioritization system. So what Louis has just said is he's going to go gather the information, do the research, and present at the January council meeting. I would say that's somewhere in the high to medium level of prioritization. We're going to look at it at either the next council meeting or the following one. And so I'd kind of like to use that system. If something is more urgent than that, we'd like to, classify it as urgent so that the expectation is being met that if council wants something done urgently, that we're actually working it as an urgent priority and help us put the appropriate priority level on it. So for this one, I would say it's kind of in a high to medium level of priority, and you should get something back, barring any problems that Louis runs into that I don't anticipate. You should hear about it at the January council meeting, a full report from Louis with a recommendation. Fair enough?
Yes. Ms. McLean?
I do have a question. With either one of these programs, do they have, are they just permit-based applications, or do they have any aspect where we could actually have citizens making code compliance comments? They see a house that's out of compliance, or they see a car that's out of compliance. Do either one of these programs have that component as well?
Yes, ma'am. The short answer is yes. One of them does. iWorks does. My permits now is, I did a screen grab on here to make sure I know what I'm talking about when I address you. And my permits now is simply online permitting. And there's probably a collections aspect to that as well, but it is simply permitting. To answer your question directly, iWorks has several modules, and some of them that I ticked off that I feel are a little more relevant to what we do here in the size of the city that we have is permitting, code enforcement, facilities management, in case that ever comes up in the future. At least you have that. And these aren't modules that you buy. And like I said, I have experience with this software. You don't buy these modules. They're there. Business licensing, which ties into permits, citizen engagement, and electronic document management. And there's also payment systems, too. There is some integration. I did speak to this vice president today, and he said that he can work outside of the iWork application to integrate existing pay collection systems, or they have a proprietary one that can do the same thing. And interestingly enough, if we followed a model of other cities where we have kind of a parallel software environment that would be in code taking care of public safety, which is a robust application for that aspect, including fire. and iWorks for everything else. The gentleman told me that there is patches that came directly from Encode that have the ability to integrate payment collection or payment capture services from any third-party vendor or a proprietary vendor, that a proprietary module in iWorks, and actually integrate it into Encode for the benefit of finance, for reconciliation at the end of the day.
What was the module that you mentioned after citizen engagement? You had business licenses, citizen engagement, there was one more, and then payment.
So I have permitting, code enforcement, facilities, business licensing, electronic document management, and citizen engagement.
Ms. Miglen, do you have anything else?
No, I like that it's got all these things. I would rather have less programs and things we're working with and more consolidation. So I like that it's got all of these different tools for the city.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Gregory?
Is this the online permit application? Somebody fills out the permit online and submits it to the city, correct, electronically?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Brennan, what is our legal status if somehow the application is lost or is hacked, and there's a deadline for somebody to get an application in and something like that happens? What is the legal status of the city or the applicant?
I don't know. That would have to be worked out. You know, it's just like somebody mails something in and the city never gets it. It's, you know, a similar issue to that, and you just have to figure out what the solution's gonna be. You know, some things, the legal requirement is you mail it, and if you have proof you mailed it, you're done whether the person ever gets it or not. Some things they have to get it before it matters. So I don't know if I know a general answer to your question. I think we'd have to work out where everybody stands in relation to lost or hacked or missing information.
I think we ought to have that in place before we initiate this.
I agree. I think that needs to be part of the plan. I agree with you.
Thank you.
That's a good question, sir, and I can bring that up during the presentations, or when these vendors start offering presentations, I can ask them things like secure socket layers, which is an encryption service, and if it's proprietary within it, or there's something else that we'd have to concern ourselves about, and also where the liability stands for exactly your question. If we're buying this, is the purchase of it automatically given the liability to the vendor that we're using, or does the city retain some type of liability in that aspect?
And I imagine that any concerns that Councilman Gregory might have, other cities have had as well, so I can't imagine that we shouldn't be able to find a good solution.
Yes, and as a regular user of online payment processing, it always at the end offers you a receipt, which you then can save as a PDF file. You can print a copy for yourself. So you do have documentation when you're done using it that it's been completed, and you have those copies electronically, and you can print a hard copy. So if the city says they lose it, you can say, well, no, I have a PDF copy, and I also have a hard copy that you can print out. So that would help with anything that maybe slipped through the cracks. So if you're a good consumer online, which most people who use software like this do it regularly, they would at the end save their receipt and save a copy and print a copy.
So, Mr. Brennan, that's sort of like the mailbox rule. Thank you.
And I think that if I may interject a little here as well, the two-part, I see the question kind of going into two parts here. So if we don't get the permit and the job, say for instance, never gets started because we didn't get the permit, there's that liability question of that. Where do we fall because we didn't issue the permit? As far as the payment goes, I'm pretty sure, and I'm maybe speaking out of turn here, but I'm pretty sure that the payment service that we do use now that goes direct to IBC Bank has its own liability aspect, and if we decide to stay with that third-party vendor, there is no compatibility issue. So if IBC, for the lack of a better term, is eating the liability in first place, then they're going to continue to do that. Now, if we go into a built-in proprietary payment system, then we would have to address exactly where their liability is. It doesn't seem to me that we would need to reinvent the wheel. Of the liability aspect has already been covered by IBC, but that's not for me to decide.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Louis. I think we all look forward to hearing back from you in January.
Thank you, sir. Do I discuss that, the other one? Do I wait?
I think we'll wait for right now.
All
Next, we have discussing the financing options for the purchase of the ladder fire truck from Siddons Martin. Chief Dover?
Before we jump into that, can I confirm that item 6 was also pulled? Not.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's pulled completely.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so for this one, you guys will remember during the, council will remember during the budget discussions, Chief Dover got up and talked about our fire truck, our ladder truck, and this is just kind of the follow-on from that, to have just an open, candid conversation about options for fire trucks. One of these options, if we elect to go with it, we need to, well, we don't need to, but it would save the city $30,000 if they made the decision in December versus in January. So it is somewhat time sensitive depending on the option we select. So with that, Darrell, I'll turn it over to you, and break a leg, Chief. I'm going to apologize to the folks that are in the audience. If you'd like, you can come around. We've got some seats set up if you want to see the presentation. I hate to make you get up and move, but because it's a workshop format, we couldn't find a way to make it work for everybody. So, but you're welcome to move over if you'd like to view the screen. Thanks.
Pierce typically builds trucks that they use for stock trucks or demos that they can use to showcase these vehicles and send them to departments like us where they'll let us run them through the paces, check everything out, and do different things. Basically, the truck that we spec'd out is it's a medium-duty ladder and platform. It would be a 100-foot ladder truck, and some available options that would be available for immediate delivery if we so choose so, that would be comparable. They actually have 2 other trucks right now available with Pierce. To give you some comparisons, this would be probably the higher end truck. Right now this truck, Aspect, when it was built approximately 1 year ago. The actual build price on it was $1.25 million. This truck has been discounted significantly to $1,050,000. It has approximately 12,000 miles on it. It's got a 500 horsepower Detroit diesel engine, 2,000 gallon per minute pump. 300-gallon water tank. It is capable of a 1,000-pound tip load at the platform. When flowing water, that's reduced to 500 pounds because of the weight of the water. There's seating for 6. It has a 10 kilowatt generator on board. Typically when we go to fight fires, one of the first things that we do as we arrive is disconnect the power to the house and the gas. We don't want to go in as we're introducing water and everything else during firefighting. We don't want to get electrocuted, so we kill power, we bring our own power with us. This has a 200-foot electrical cord reel that would come off of it as well, extension cord that's pre-wired to the generator, and as well as multiple outlets around the truck that we could use. It's got dual monitors on the tip. Basically, our ladder truck now has one monitor that we can use as an elevated stream. This would allow us to actually use 2 separate streams. So it's a large water pipe, large deck gun, a really large water pipe that would spray fire hose, absolutely. So in addition to that, at the platform, it also has 2 additional discharges or 2 additional outlets on the platform where we could hook additional hoses to this and use at an elevated position, a roof. The Wedgewood, we actually used a line off of Alamo Heights ladder truck that we actually took through a 3rd floor window to use while we were fighting fire. This actually has 2 additional outlets on the platform, as well as a storage box on the ladder for 100 foot of 1 3/4 hose, which is typically our main attack line that we use at a house fire. In addition to that, there's also storage for a Stokes basket on the ladder itself. Stokes basket, you often see them in the movies when they're bringing somebody down the side of the cliff that's been injured, the big orange basket that the patient's laying in. It'd be the same type device. We use them here as well for low to high angle rescues. It would put it here at the ladder tip closely, you know, it'd be there if we needed it relatively quickly. Additional features, it's got a 4,500 PSI air bottle that's actually mounted to the ladder that would enable us, 2 firefighters, if during prolonged firefighting, if they were up there for an extended period of time. Our air packs that we use now currently last about 30 to 45 minutes. If they were up there for an extended period of time, they could actually hook into the onboard air system and they could continue to stay up there without having to come down and get new air bottles and go back up. This is another vehicle or another truck that's available. This is actually very, very similar to what we spec'd. There are a few things that have been left off compared to what we were actually proposing to add in when it was built. This is a 110-foot platform. Its working weight is actually reduced to 750 pounds at the tip with a 500-pound tip load while flowing water. So you can't put as many people in the bucket, 1, because it's not as big, 2, because it can't handle that much weight. This truck lists for $991,000 at this time. It's got approximately 12,000 miles on it. It was built along with the other one about a year ago. It has a smaller pump, a 1,250 GPM pump, a 500-gallon water tank. Both of these trucks, as well as the one that we spec, have rear-facing cameras, which is kind of more or less the industry standard. Most of your vehicles, personal vehicles, are coming with them now. The fire service is using them along with spotters just to prevent, with the blind spots and everything else, backing a large piece of equipment like this for safety. It does have the same 10 kilowatt generator on it. It has one single monitor that's actually not at the platform. It is immediately behind it. That actually stows behind the ladder itself. This only has seating for 4. It's a single axle. The other truck previously is a tandem axle. What this means is this truck can actually, it disperses the weight a little bit greater. It can carry more equipment. It also has additional storage compartments on the side. This truck's actually only about 20 inches longer than the next truck, but with that 20 inches, you do get more compartment space on the sides of the truck for more equipment. The truck, as we spec'd, is listed at $948,698 after a $41,000 discount for building the truck. Pierce actually gives you a discount if you decide to build with them. However, you have the 12 to 13 month wait time. This one would have a 500 horsepower Detroit diesel engine. The truck that's comparable to this, the smaller one, has a 450 horsepower Cummins engine. Currently, we were advised to probably stay away from the Cummins if we could. Not that it's a bad engine, but there has been some technical issues that they're trying to get some bugs worked out of it in the latest batch of engines that came out. They did recommend the Detroit diesel. This is a little bit bigger engine as well. It would be spec'd with a 2,000 GPM pump, a 500-gallon water tank. Again, as the truck previous, it's got a 750-pound tip load and a 500-pound tip load while flowing water, the rear-facing camera, 10-kilowatt generator, and a single monitor behind the platform. One thing that I'd like to mention, all three of these trucks have a what Pierce prides himself on, the TAC Force suspension, which is basically an upgraded suspension on the front of the trucks that help prevent rollovers. It does have side airbags, just like all your vehicles, as well as forward-facing airbags. There's pros and cons to all these trucks. The first truck that I listed is the most expensive. It has a lot more features, in my opinion, that would be very beneficial to the city. One thing to consider is this truck's going to be here for 20 years. We're replacing our last ladder truck that's been here 20 years, and I know this is a pretty significant purchase for the city, but like I said, it's something that we're going to be keeping around probably longer than me. So I hope to be here about 15 or 20 years, so maybe the next chief will be up here talking to all of you guys on council and asking for a new ladder truck then. Currently, I broke down some of our repair costs and maintenance costs that we've been dealing with our 1998 E1 ladder. This year, we're currently at $8,650.12. That's not including a bill. It just came back from the shop last week to have some critical repairs done on it that I tried to put off until the first of the year, but it just, as a safety aspect, we couldn't do it. It will be going back to the shop after the first of the year for more issues that we're having with it. 2016, we spent almost $11,000 in repairs. 2015, $5,000 in repairs. 2014, $7,000. In 2013, and we spent $3,700. Right now, unfortunately, we don't get, Pierce won't take it as a trade-in because of its age. Being that it's going to be 20 years old next year, it loses the ISO certification, which I spoke to that during the budget hearings. Basically, ISO helps to regulate some of our insurance costs as homeowners. With this truck being 20 years old, it loses its value, essentially. All of these trucks are known as, in the firefighting world, as quints. They they serve dual purposes. Not only are they a ladder truck, but they're also a pumper. So you get dual credit for that. In the event that the engine goes down, this truck serves the same purpose as the engine with the addition of the 100-foot ladder on top. Right now, roughly, we're looking at probably a $30,000 to $35,000 value on this truck, and more than likely it would go to an outside broker, and it would probably go to Mexico or South America to continue service there. As I spoke to during the budget hearings, there is some history with this truck, with some unfortunate accidents that kind of make other departments a little leery of purchasing it. So I think if we could get $30,000 to $35,000 to help offset some of the pricing and the cost of these trucks, that would be great if we can get it. I asked the salesperson, Greg, to get me more numbers on all the trucks. He sent me the ones on the Aero XT, the first one that's priced at the $1,050,000. There'd be $500 due at signing. The remaining balance of $550 would be financed through PNC Equipment, which is Oshkosh. They're the actual parent company of Pierce Manufacturing. Oshkosh builds everything from heavy dump trucks and equipment to military vehicles. They now own Pierce Manufacturing, who's the manufacturer of the fire trucks. If financed at 5 years, it would be a rate of 2.62% with 5 annual payments of $118,793.34. 7 years at 2.78%, 7 annual payments of $87,548, or 10 years at 2.95 would be 10 annual payments of $64,312.36. I apologize. I had my notes written down to show ultimately what we'd be paying after financing and everything else once the truck was paid off. This is similar for those that were on council previously to what we did when we purchased the engine. We put a portion of the monies down, and then we financed the rest for the next 5 years. Yes, sir. Correct. That's all I have as far as this. These trucks are available. However, they're on a kind of a first person to show up and buy it, just like at a car lot. First person that shows up with the money can have these vehicles. So not to pressure it or push us forward, I don't think we could make a bad decision, you know, going with any of the trucks. It's just how quickly, in my opinion, it'd be beneficial to the city to move on one of the demo trucks that were available. In addition to the cost that we're already putting into our current truck, we have the downtime that we're experiencing with it being out of service and away from the city. This last time it spent a week, almost a week, at the repair shop. So it was not available, was not in service in the city.
Thank you, Chief. You know, as per our conversation, my concern was putting more money into a vehicle that we wouldn't ultimately get out of it when we sold it, not to mention the fact that it wouldn't be available possibly several times throughout the year when it's in service. Anybody have any questions or comments for Chief?
I had a question.
Scott?
Yes, ma'am.
On the demo truck, when would the delivery be?
I would think we'd be able to get it probably within a month, month and a half, roughly. It's currently, they're both at the factory in Appleton, Wisconsin, where they manufacture them. We would travel to Wisconsin, do a walk around, make sure that this is, you know, the truck is acceptable. They would then letter it, put graphics on it, maybe do some minor changes for us prior to then delivering it to us here.
Okay, now the first one is the demo truck and the second was the custom build?
The first two were demos.
Oh, the first two were
and
demos.
the third one was the one that we actually spec'd.
Okay.
I did include the spec with the council packet, and I apologize if that was kind of a little too much. I just wanted to make sure that there was transparency and everything. Everybody could get a good look at everything if there were questions.
I do have a couple of questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Regarding the ISO rating, I think that's one thing that I am concerned about, that and any of these are sufficiently tall for us to have better height coverage. At what point in the year for the ISO rating does the 20 years count? Is it as soon as we turn over into January that truck is going to?
It'll be the end of the year.
Okay.
Basically, the truck was manufactured in 1998, so 2018 is the 20-year mark. In addition to that, our current ladder is only 75 feet tall. It does not reach the top of our 2 largest buildings in the city, one of those being the Wedgewood, the other one being One Castle Hills. During the Wedgewood fire, San Antonio Fire Department, Platform 32, actually performed a rescue on the 11th floor with a truck very much similar to the first truck that I showed, the Aero XT. They were very, very similar, with the exception of basically the cab that's on the truck is the only design difference. They're the same height, same style ladder, same style platform, and they actually removed the occupants from the 11th floor with their 100-foot platform.
I had one other question.
Yes, ma'am.
On the first of the 2 demo trucks, it was the 100-foot. You'd mentioned that its original value, or its original cost was $1.25 million, and the asking price for it was like $1.05.
Yes, ma'am.
On the second one, it was listed for our price would be $991,000. What was its original sticker price?
That I'm not sure, ma'am. I can get that information for you.
It's not that big of a deal. Just curious if it was as good a deal as the other one was.
Any other comments or questions?
I have a few.
Mr. Gregory?
Yes, sir.
The ISO certification runs out, you said it's a 20-year thing. Is that mileage as well as time?
Just time, sir.
And let's say we kept the vehicle, if we can't pawn it off on anybody,
Yes, sir.
and it's not certified. Is there any liability the city has if we use that as a secondary vehicle backup, even though it's not certified? Is there any, there's no
sir.
liability? So we could use that as a backup vehicle, so we don't necessarily have to sell it.
You're absolutely right, sir.
Because the repairing is less than 1% of the cost of a new truck a year. That's basically what you're doing. And to me, that sounds like an absolute gift if we can have a backup truck and have it only have the cost of 1% of the cost of a new truck.
Yes, sir.
How did they come up with a $500,000 down? Did they just happen to know we had that in the account?
Yes, sir.
That's what I thought. The warranty.
Yes, sir.
How long is the warranty of a used vehicle?
It'll be 1 year from the date of delivery. There is a 20-year structural warranty on the ladder itself. So
And what if
basically,
it's new?
it's 1 year as well.
So new or used, it's still a warranty of 1 year.
Yes, sir.
What do we need in the city?
In my opinion,
What do we really need?
a 100-foot ladder. From a safety standpoint, and again, going back to the Wedgewood, and I don't mean to keep dwelling on that, we have an aging group of residents here. In the event that we had to task them, we're tasked with rescuing someone, and in this case, both the persons that were brought down from the 11th floor did have some mobility issues. They used walkers to get around and things of this nature. It was much safer to bring them down on a platform as opposed to asking them to attempt to climb down the ladder with firefighters. With the larger ladder, it also enables us to put more men at the tip to assist those patients or anybody that may be hurt, sick, or anything else. Currently, our ladder right now reaches approximately the 6th floor, depending on how far we're offset from the building of the Wedgewood or One Castle Hills. We do not reach the roof at either building. I think, in my opinion, I was a young fireman when I came to work here in 1999. We had just taken delivery of the truck. And as a young fireman, I saw the need for a 100-foot platform. The truck, in my opinion, is inadequate for what we actually have, the 75. That's why I'm pushing for a 100-foot ladder now. I spoke to this a bit during the budget hearings. Not only are we getting a 100-foot vertical, we can reach out 100 foot. Mr. Vandewally and I talked briefly today about Arbor Grove, the apartment complex across from Lee High School. There are some challenges there, even getting our engine or pumper around the backside of it, as of course more so with the ladder truck. With this truck, with any ladder truck, you're going to be able to get that horizontal reach or that reach to the side of the vehicle. This would be 100 foot. We can extend out with the one truck, we can actually deploy hand lines off of that platform, either through the buildings at a lower level and get basically our lines where we need them. Currently, right now, we utilize what's called skid loads or apartment lays, and it's helping to deploy additional hoses and different things there. Would be just another added feature that we could benefit from during water rescues, and we've seen it recently back in July when we had some of the high water. We can get that 100-foot reach as well. We have used our ladder truck to pull people out of West Avenue and the frontage roads for 410. It's just, not only are you getting that 100-foot in height, you're getting 100-foot out as well.
I think you're absolutely right to get the tallest you can.
Yes, sir.
My friend was on the 9th floor,
Yes, sir.
and it would have been better for her to have had a ladder than to struggle through the smoke. But now that we were doing, the Wedgewood may be redone, I think it's got to have at least a 100-foot ladder.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to talk about the financing.
Yes, sir.
If we decide to get a new truck and it takes 13 months to do,
Yes, sir.
can the financing be nailed down today?
That, I believe it would be. Yes, sir.
I do advise council to do that. You have a new Fed chairman coming in soon. He's indicated there may be as much as 2 to 4 increases in the funds rate coming up over the next year. So whatever we decide, funding, be it a vehicle that drive in now or drive in 13 months, let's nail it down ASAP.
PNC, I apologize, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. PNC has offered to have a representative speak to finance or any council members that have questions. I'll be the first to admit I'm probably not the best guy to talk to about the financing and the numbers in that aspect, but they would provide somebody to us that would be more than happy to go over all of this with anyone that's interested and discuss options.
Doesn't the
and
fire
things.
department have it's an international or national association headquartered in Virginia, isn't that right?
The National Fire Academy is in Virginia, yes, sir. Or actually in Maryland.
Is there a headquarters for,
The U.S. Fire Administration and NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association, are all located in that general vicinity there, the D.C., Virginia area.
because I'm gonna have to check, but I think I have a nephew who may be head of that thing. And what I'm getting at is, can they provide a lower interest rate?
That's something I'm not sure. It's something that I can certainly try to find out and entertain. That was something that Nora and I spoke to with Mr. Vanderwally earlier, even exploring financing through IBC or somebody else if they could match the finance rates and different things to see what was available.
Ms. Scott, do you have a question?
I do. Is losing our ISO rating, is that going to affect me as a homeowner?
It can. It helps to determine some of our insurance ratings, homeowners insurance.
So if I'm negotiating for my homeowner's insurance and we don't have an ISO rating, I could end up paying more for that year that I'm waiting for us to get a truck?
Potentially, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so as a homeowner, I would rather have that ISO rating starting in January than having to wait 13 months without one if I'm negotiating with my homeowner's insurance for rates.
At this time, we currently are a 4 or a 5. I'm not sure what our rating is. The city of San Antonio this year actually just dropped. The lower you go, the better. They actually became an ISO 1 rated city, which is outstanding. It'd be very difficult for us as a small city to attain that. However, if we could get down to a 3 or a 2, would be incredible. And it's my goal and my intentions next year to pursue that as best we can, and we would probably be reevaluated sometime mid-year, July-ish to October, somewhere in there. We may be able to be reevaluated and move forward and see if we can't get ours lowered. There's some things that we'll have to do at the fire department and some different things that we'll do throughout the city to help reduce that, but that's something that I'm hoping to be able to do this next year.
Okay, but with the trucks specifically, once we lose that ISO, what does our number go to?
It would probably end up dropping to, it would go ultimately to a higher number, potentially. I don't know. They take multiple things into consideration when determining our ISO rating. Everything from training, the number of manpower that we have on duty, our levels of certifications, again, staffing, our water system and the supply and the pressures that we have available and different things. So there's a number of considerations that they take into account for our ISO rating, but it definitely would not help.
It wouldn't help, and it could go up
Absolutely.
without a new truck. Okay, sooner rather than later.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? All right, we're going to move on to discussing, agenda item number 2, discussing the purchase of a multi-purpose tractor for Public Works.
Yes, council, you'll also remember this came up during the budget discussions that we mentioned that Mr. Harada was, had a 30-year-old tractor or 24-year-old tractor that he would like to replace. It spends a lot of time in the shop. And so I'll let Rick speak to that. He mentioned it during the budget process. There is one change to your council packet. We had an incident early last week, where one of our Public Works guys bumped into the wall over near the estates and was attacked by bees and was stung several times on his face. So there's a liability there. When we spoke to the Kubota dealer, he indicated that only about 1 in 5 of these tractors now are bought without a cab on it because of the problem with the Africanized honeybees in this area now. It creates a liability for us as a city to have something that doesn't have a cab on it. So we got a new quote that is circulating around for $43,000 for our Public Works tractor. And I don't want to steal too much of Rick's thunder. I just wanted to make that point that we've kind of changed tax just a little bit, just kind of in light of where we're at and in recent developments. So over to you, Rick.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderwell, for that info there for that tractor. Yes, council members, there was a move to go ahead and purchase the tractor at the $27,000, noting how much money I would have left over. You know, I was really surprised to note that we would go through that process to get the new tractor, because tractor has 3,000 hours on it. It's 24 years old, 1993 as the same time that I started. So I saw it when it came in brand new, but it's ready to go. Luckily, as to purchasing the tractor, I wanted to make sure that we'd come into a savings with the accessories that it has. The accessories that I wanted to get with the tractor that came out that was in your packet, the first proposal was $27,000. The only thing was not one item, which was the backhoe that was not compatible to the new tractor. And so we were going to go ahead and go forth and trying to get that tractor. But then I was thinking about it over the weekend, because I've had to drive that tractor multiple times myself, and even as supervisor, and the heat really beats on us, so we were just going to get the canopy instead. But Mr. Vanderwell and Nora, most of all, working with HR now, noted that, you know, a closed-in cab would be very, very good to go ahead and on a safety factor for the employees. Mr. Vanderwell only knows of one incident. I've been here for 4 incidents. One employee, luckily, he made it through. He jumped off the tractor, and it was over there off of Banyan, drainage right off of that in between Tamworth and Glen Tower. The tractor fell in, and luckily, the way it landed, standing, but with the tractor running, with that wheel, the turning wheel was still up, but the person jumped off, luckily, but he, you know, took off and did get stung multiple times. The other 2 times were over here off the red wall. And they luckily also too got to turn off the tractor. But this last one person that got bit or stung here, it didn't get fortunate enough to get away fast enough. He was trying to save the red wall not to get hit, and trying to see if he could try to turn off the tractor so it wouldn't be running. And so he got stung pretty bad on his face. So this is where we come back to looking at Mr. Vanderwell's concern as to looking forth and looking and purchasing a tractor with a cab in it. I talked to Ewald to see if I could get an update on a quote. So this is the quote that he gave us. And then he says, Rick, you know, out of every 5 tractors that I sell, 4 of them will have enclosed cabs. And that's because of the fact that a lot of the field, especially on our frontage roads and easements, where they have the tall grass that isn't getting touched, where they have time to go ahead and have, bees accumulate in their areas there with hives, will attack the people who are mowing the easements there. So as you see, it came from the 27, and now we're looking at going at 43,000. There's going to be a trade-in that they're going to give us on the tractor that we have right now. And then they're going to see, I want to see about putting a sealant that goes in the tires to help protect against the tractor getting flats or cuts in the tire gouges.
Speak to your budget.
Sure. In the packet, I think Mrs. Gonzalez put in, as you can look at, we put in a separate sheet on our treasurer information to go ahead, excuse me for leaving the mic there, to accommodate what we're going to have. So looking at what my extras are available for in salaries and other line items, we looked at, and because of the fact that we also had 2 employees that, left, and so we had that money's available, we have $71,000 available. And that's still to manage, that Mr. Vandy well said, make sure that each department had enough to maintain their department for the rest of the year. And so I looked at those line items and subtracted what I felt would be sufficient to make sure that we could make it through. And so the monies that is coming available is, that's where we would get the money to go ahead and go purchase the tractor. Oh, yes, sir. That excludes the street maintenance fund. It doesn't include that. So it's just on my line items of what I do use to maintain my department.
Sounds good, Rick. Thank you so much. We have any questions? Mr. Gregory?
Is this money taken out of the 2018 budget?
No, sir. It's going to be out of
2017.
2017. Yes, sir.
Is there a warranty on this tractor?
Yes, sir, there is. As it mentions on the proposal, it'll give you the warranties and everything available and the discounts that we have there. The Kubota 2-year warranty, see it at the bottom to the left?
Does it cover everything?
Yes, sir.
Does Packmore make a tractor?
Not Packmore, sir. Packmore is
Packmore
just,
doesn't make a tractor?
no, sir. Packmore is just a box, hydraulic box for our sanitation trucks.
Does this tractor, when it's enclosed, have air conditioning
Yes, sir.
and a heater and a radio, I assume?
I don't know about the radio, but I do know it's enclosed with heating and air
I
conditioning.
think you'd need an air conditioner in the summertime.
Yes,
It'd be
sir,
like
it does have that. That's what I'm saying, that for sure, but not the radio.
Why are we trading in the old one?
Well, having to be, and I'm sorry, sir, I didn't get that part, but looking at what my maintenance sheets that Mr. Dover brought out, the monies that we've been spending also too on our tractor has been sufficient. Getting to cost to where we're having to try to see what parts that I can purchase and not downtime, so we're not having the, the city looking with tall grass and stuff like that. So I end up bringing the parts and trying to, get them fixed and put on myself versus it being left in Bernie, because that's the only place we can leave it, or Seguin, but Bernie's the ones that I normally work with. But it's coming out to where it's just getting too old for us to keep on maintaining. And remember also too that, that I mentioned that the accessories, we got a shredder, 5-foot shredder that goes in the back, a box grader that goes in the back, and then a post hole digger that goes in the back. So these accessories are going to be compatible to the tractor that we have now, except just one, the backhoe.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, so you think this is the best way for us to move, Rick?
Yes, sir. I feel it's really time before we end up losing as the same as the fire truck. We're not going to get anything for trade-in. Just the little monies that we're getting right now is something to help out towards a purchase also.
I'm assuming that this tractor's a little bigger?
Just a little bit, and gear and also power, sir, yes.
Is there going to be any problems transporting it, or?
No, sir, no, it's just still the same size, just has a higher engine speed.
Okay. Sounds good. If there's nothing else, we'll move on to the next agenda item.
Okay, thanks, Councilman. I just want to mention one thing, and that is, again, at the December meeting, the mayor's made it clear that he doesn't want any action items on there. So our intent is to include some of these items as potential consent agenda items for that. I think in the discussion on the fire truck, what I heard earlier, and I'm sorry, we were having some Ustream problems, so we were troubleshooting those. That's why we were scrambling around. But I think what I heard from that is rather than sacrifice our ISO ratings, it was expressed that it would be better to go ahead and go with with one of the slightly used, I should say, demo trucks versus having them build a truck for the city. So in my, and again, this, I'm not asking for you to vote or anything like that on it. I'm just saying that that's probably what we would push forward in the council packet under the consent agenda. And then if any item gets pulled from the consent agenda, it would probably be pulled and then tabled to a later special meeting because the mayor wanted to save time for the tech stop presentation. So I just want to throw that out on the table so that we're all y'all understand the mindset of some of the things we've discussed. Same thing with the Public Works tractor as well, even though it's less than the $50,000 limit for city manager approval. Just wanted to make sure that it was out and in the public dialogue, so that, under the concept of being transparent with our citizenry on what we're up to. Okay, the next item is to talk a little bit about the Castle Hills City Council message board and the rules of engagement for that. And this is an item that was approved by council a few months back. I've got Mr. Rob Cockle here. I'm just going to speak through. I gave you a white paper on this, and I gave you an updated copy. When I went back and looked at it, I thought I didn't quote the authority under which we're doing this, which is the Texas Government Code, Section 551.006. And so I've took an excerpt from that and given that to you in its entirety, basically. Again, this has been approved since 2013 for our city fathers to be able to communicate in this fashion and using the internet and not violating the Texas Open Meetings Act. So the government code spells that out and speaks to that a little bit, and it lays out the conditions for those. I'm not going to read that to you. And I think we've had this discussion already in a council meeting, so I'm not going to read that to you. But then in addition to that, there were some administrative items that we raised, saying, the message board isn't a political tool. It will be accessible from a link on the city's splash page, so it's the main cover page for the city. There will be a link. It has to be, according to the government code, just one click away. It will be viewable by everyone, and then we will establish hierarchies within the system, and those are laid out there. An owner, I had put editor in the original, but publisher is the next level down, who would be able to post comments at will. An author who will be able to make comments, but then would require a publisher to publish those. And then a viewer, and that would be, again, just the general public that would be able to view but not make comment onto the website. And then we talk about, just some of the rules of engagement, and don't post any data, text message that could be deemed defamatory, abusive, harassing, vulgar, so on and so forth. There's a certain amount of just due diligence that goes along with this so that we don't keep repeating the same topics over and over and over. And anyway, this is just a set of the rules of engagement that we put together just kind of as a sample, and y'all have had a chance to read through them, so I'm not going to read them to you. What I would recommend on this item is that we take this and set up a special meeting for the council for a tutorial. And Mr. Cockle will set up the accounts for you, and we'll get you set up online, and we can sit in here and we can actually broadcast it out there, and we can maybe discuss a couple topics using the message board and work our way through that and how that works so everybody is completely comfortable with it, so that when we walk away from that, everybody's well-versed in how to use it and understands it. So that would be my recommendation, is that we set that forum up. Now, again, this is one of those where the priorities are, it's important to establish. Rob has been extremely busy pulling fiber, getting fiber into the building, replacing all the computers on the city staff with a computer refresh program. You can see what he's doing over here to the front of the dais as part of the court security measures. And next week, he has an audit with the police department and DPS that are going to come in here, and part of that, a big part of that is internet security and server security and stuff. So he'll be tied up through the middle of next week. But I'd like to, like I say, once we get that all through the chute, turn this over to Rob so he can set up those accounts, and then we can have that special meeting. Probably by, I don't know, mid-December-ish would be the goal, I think. Certainly by the end of December. Sound good?
Sounds good. Ms. McLean, you have a comment?
I do. I do not believe that we can set up the hierarchy like you have set forth in this, because I think it violates the government code. I think you can have the council members and our department heads that we say can publish things. I don't believe the law allows us to delete anything off of it or remove comments. Once they're made, they're out there and they become public record, and they stay public record. That's part of the check and balance, I think, with the government code allowing us to do this. And I don't believe that you can have somebody as an author that says, well, I like what Amy said, but I don't like what Douglas said. I don't think you can have a publisher. I think you can either post or you can't post, and there's no in between. There's no check on that other than they're authorized people to post, and they're the viewers that can view it. I don't think you can separate between authors and publishers. I think if you're a council member or a department head, you can make comments. I don't think anybody has the right to decide whether my comment about something can be posted or not. I think that flies in the face of what the provisions are, where it's...
Those are just the options available. We do not have to make anybody an author.
Okay.
But am I correct in understanding that you're saying that nobody should be able to delete a comment from it?
That's absolutely correct,
Okay.
because what it says is that where is it? It only talks about posting. The only thing that it talks about doing is when the body removes from the online message board or similar internet application a communication that's been posted for at least 30 days, you have to maintain it for a period of 6 years, so we have to keep backup. But there's no provision in this that allows for deleting specific comments. It just talks about how we keep our backup. So I don't think that we can go and...
So we'll have to look into that and maybe get council to take a look at it, and maybe call the TML folks as well to say, okay, what happens if somebody posts something that is either in error or that is abusive, inflammatory, you know, says something that could open the city up for litigation, and, you know.
Well, I mean, and that's part of the check in this. We're all supposed to... We all have a code of ethics that we're supposed to be abiding by as a member of council or as a mayor or as a public official. And so that is the check on this, is that if you're that egregious, then our citizens see that and they can...
Well, it could be as simple as something as autocorrect, or something that
Well,
puts a word in there that
is
shouldn't be
true.
in there, you know. That's what I'm saying, is so we'll need to get a ruling
But
on that before we actually have a tutorial, I think, Councilman.
So I really feel like what we have is publishers and we have viewers, and that's really it. I don't think there's another category of people.
Mr. Vanderwall, correct me if I'm wrong, but TML sent out a pretty lengthy report on this, correct?
They have a 43-slide presentation that was prepared by an attorney for the city of Austin. And I perused through that, and there is a lot of fluff in there. I don't know that it adds any more than just reading the Texas government code and then establishing your own rules of engagement. But we can go over that if we want to as well. But like I said, about half of the slides are just are there for presentation. You know.
I think at the very least, if you could send that out to the council members so at their leisure they can dig through that and make sure that
I can.
we're doing everything in compliance.
I'll send it out and everybody can review it before we go to the tutorial. But that's a good question, Councilman McGlynn. I think we need to take a look at it and find out how do we deal with it if something as simple as an autocorrect is made, or the wrong word gets typed in that needs to go in and be corrected, so.
Well, I don't think you can correct them. I think the only way to be able to correct it would be to go in with another comment and say, dang autocorrect, got me again, or we just need to proofread our comments before we post them.
Ms. Scott? Oh, Mr. Gregory?
How confidential is this? If this is supposed to be between council members and staff, how confidential are these postings?
It's not confidential, it's all the general public can view it. That's how it meets the requirements of the Texas Open Meeting Act. So in other words, citizens will be able to go in and see the postings
Yeah, that's
between the
what that
council
said.
members. So it's just like what we're doing here, just in a digital format where you're typing in responses and having dialogue across the table.
But see, where
No
I see
voting is
that,
allowed.
Ms. McGlynn was saying the law in the government code prohibits some of this. Is that the Open Meetings Act that you're referring to?
the Open Meetings Act is why we want to do this, because, for instance, this is how it would help us in the upcoming month. We have 3 fire trucks we're looking at. Well, we could be on the message board. The public sees everything we comment. I could say, well, I like the $991,000 one, and you could say, I like the $1.050 million one. And Mrs. Scott could say, well, I like the one that we're going to custom build, and we could have that discussion on the message board, and then it truly would be consent agenda when we come to the meeting, but the public has seen our discussion of it. And so everything is really, I feel like the public in the long run is going to hear more of our reasoning for why we want to do things without having to sit at a meeting here for 3 hours.
Yes, and if I have a question concerning something, for instance, the lighting's in the commons. 2 council members were assigned by the mayor to figure out what's going on, but I may have a question. I can ask on the message board, Alderman McClellan, Alderman Trevino, how is it going with the lights in the commons? What's the current situation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And they can answer me. And we're having a discussion amongst 3 people, but it's completely open because anyone can read our conversation. Whereas I can't call either of them and ask on the phone because then it's in private and be breaking the Open Meetings Act. So it leaves it in the open, but it gives us the ability to discuss things amongst ourselves completely in the open, completely transparent.
Do you think it would be helpful, or would it be too lengthy, to make a copy of the discussion from every time we meet to the next time we decide on a particular issue, rather than just saying, put it on the consent agenda? That if for somebody's out of town, we're on vacation, and they hadn't had time to look at all these comments for 2 weeks, they can at least see it in printed form in their packet, so that it can go on the consent agenda. Would that be helpful?
Are you talking about for council members?
Yeah.
I think that we could ask for that if we wanted it. I don't necessarily think that I would want it because I usually have my phone and I pay attention to some of that stuff more often, but I think we could request it if we wanted it.
Well, you were away in Italy for a while. I doubt you wouldn't be looking at your computer
Oh, I
to see
looked
what
at my
somebody thinks on a,
I looked at my phone every day in the evening before I went to bed when I had cell service, but
okay. All right.
Okay, well, I look forward to the next update where we can proceed. Next on the agenda, we have the discussion for the 2018 election of the Bexar County Appraisal District Board of Directors and determine the allocation of votes for a city nominee, Miss Amy McLean.
Okay, this ends the staff hour. Unless you have any questions for the staff, council, we're going to cut them loose. The rest of the agenda items are really specifically for council. Ms. Gonzalez and I will stay, as will Councilor Brennan.
Thank you all.
Okay, thanks, guys and gals. Okay, so for this particular item, this is just a follow-on from, we had this discussion in council where Ms. McLean was unanimously nominated to represent the city of Castle Hills for the Bear Appraisal District. And now we have to come up with an allocation of the 5 votes that we have as far as who we're going to vote for for the Bear Appraisal District Board. We will put this on the consent agenda. My intent is to levy all 5 votes that the City of Castle Hills has toward our ace candidate, Miss Amy McGlynn. And I just wanted to put that out for council consideration and ask you, is there anything else I should consider in this or the staff should consider in this as we move forward?
Thank you, Mr. Vanderwally.
Well, has any other city contacted you in the past where we've done this? Is we try to get the suburban cities to pool their votes behind somebody. Has any suburban city called you or anybody from any other city suggested that at all? They
have not. So I've not been contacted by anyone about this whatsoever.
Okay, I think that takes care of that.
Okay.
We can proceed on to agenda item number 8, discuss hosting a city council strategic planning retreat and selecting a date/location and a review a survey for city employees.
All right, I do not have the survey for city employees, so we can scratch that off for another day. I'm behind on that. The 2 dates that were given to me by a facilitator who has been conducting city planning retreats for various cities and counties around the state for a long, long time. He gave me Saturday, January 27th and Saturday, February 3rd as dates when he was available to facilitate a planning session for us. What he's proposing in his packet of assistance is a planning meeting ahead of time with the mayor, city manager, and selected city council members to just plan what we talk about. And then conducting a 4-hour half-day session consisting of our council, selected senior staff, and what he would do is facilitate the identification of vision, mission statement, initial strategic goals to be included in a strategic plan. Then he would work, then we'd have a small group that would be assigned to creating a focus and clarifying the elements of our strategic plan. And then he would come back and do a second 2-hour session comprised of the city council members, senior city management staff to finalize a strategic plan for the city. He proposed the 2 dates. The first date would be the 4-hour session, and then about 60 days after that is when he would come back and do the 2-hour session, which we could do in conjunction with we could do one of these work sessions. His fee for doing all of that is $2,500 to facilitate both of those and to do the planning. So the actual consultant fee is $2,500. I also have got an additional quote for food for the veranda. I was looking at places in Castle Hills, trying to find different locations where we could have the retreat, and it dawned on me that we have the gorgeous veranda. And so I called them and asked them to send me a quote, and I think I personally like it the best out of all of them. So the 3 quotes I have, one from Sushiana, one from Thai Topaz, and the third one that I just passed out is for the veranda. All of these would include lunch for council and department heads. These are all open meetings, so food would be available for purchase by residents, but that would be separate and not something covered by the city. What they proposed at Sushiana was a menu including options of hors d'oeuvres and starters, but their minimum for using their party room is $500. So no matter what we picked for food, we had to get up to $500, or there was a room fee that included the extra. If we got to $400 for food, then they would charge a $100 room fee. So Sushiana is basically a flat $500 to use their room for whatever time. Thai Topaz, the menu that is in our packet is the lunch menu, and actually they don't serve a lunch menu on Saturday, they just serve their regular dinner menu. So the prices for that would run a little bit more than what this says. They do have the rooms along the back side. I worry that there's not enough space if we had a significant number of residents that we would be too cramped. They would be able to see But I'm worried that that location would be cramped. The veranda has proposed a flat fee of $15 per person plus a $65 fee to have a staff that will attend to us while we're on site. I had them quote for a 5-hour time frame so that we have an extra hour to discuss anything that we all need to discuss that's outside of strategic planning, whether it's city organization or anything like that. The date, I did confirm with them that they are available. All three places are actually available both Saturdays. So either the January 27th or February the 3rd, all three locations are available, and they're expecting a call from me sometime after we've been able to make a decision to release both dates or one date or whatever. You have the menu that Spice of Life has proposed. They've got choice of salad and entree, and then they will have a sweet spot, which is going to have, would have baked cookies and blondies and lemon bars and Texas Millionaire brownies, and includes basically free rental at the $15 per person with the china and silverware and all the other stuff. There's no extra fee for any of that. They will allow us to bring our own AV equipment, so we don't have any AV charges from there. It would just be the 15 times 17 guests. And I believe if we could, on any of the places, if we have residents that we know want to come, we could do an Eventbrite or something and just have them respond so that we could let them know that, you know, could you have extra meals available that they pay for, that the residents have to pay cash for, or make some kind of arrangements. So that's what I have to present.
Perfect. Thank you for taking the lead on this. Do we have any comments or questions?
Mr. Brennan, open meetings that not apply to something that doesn't. So we can have something like this, the parameters as instructed. I think it's a good idea, but we've never had anything like this. We'll try.
Ms.
Any
Bell?
comments about food preferences? I mean, we're not making a decision, but
I would just ask to make sure we are conscientious of anybody's dietary restrictions. Additionally, I haven't been to the veranda, but I imagine that they may be better set up to handle a larger group as opposed to Thai Topaz or Sushi Hana.
well, and that's what I was thinking. I had described to them setting up a round table, sort of like what we have here. I don't feel like when we sit at the dais or when you sit in lines or when you sit at round tables that there's much opportunity to see each other and discuss. But they do have the capacities in the rooms that they have to be able to set us up in a big square or something where we're all looking at each other and nobody's back is, you know, you're not having to try to scoot chairs around. And I feel like for the residents that attend, it might be a more comfortable location just because they've got more space. I know Spice of Life Catering is one of my favorite in town. I was happy to see that that is the vendor that's there at the veranda because their food is quite lovely. So I think it's a good option if we want to try it. The 17 people times $15 plus the $65 ends up being $320 for food. We won't, of course, pay sales tax or anything, so it'd be about $320 for food.
So it sounds very cost-effective then to use the veranda versus the other two options.
I think so because the AV, now Thai Topaz would be, they weren't going to charge for AV equipment or anything, but I'm really concerned about the space because they've got that long room at the end. And I worry that there wouldn't be enough room for residents to actually feel like they were being included sufficiently for open meeting purposes.
I agree, because I hope as many citizens as possible come out for this, because I want as much input as possible, so yeah.
I think the veranda could, but we have projector, we have screen, so I feel like we can provide our own, and they were happy to not, you know, a lot of places will charge a fee for you to bring in any of your own stuff, and they weren't going to. So I feel like we could set up with our microphones and have Ustream and have everything that we need to have, just be in a different location.
I do have a question. What other cities has Mr. Lewis worked, or Dr. Lewis worked with?
Okay, let me find my notes. He has done Balcones Heights. He has done Amarillo. He's done, oh goodness gracious, Lampasas. Let me see if I can find my notes. Does anybody else have any other questions while I'm looking for my notes on that?
I am also a little curious how long he would spend with staff and council members. I understand that that could be a considerable amount of time, so I'm just trying to be cognizant of, how much it is in total.
Cost-wise?
No, I mean, I understand the cost, but if he's saying that he's going to meet with the mayor, the city manager, and the council members, is he saying that he'll give us 10 minutes or an hour or 20 minutes? Or?
That would just be a planning meeting. So I assume that that first meeting that he's talking about would only be like 30 minutes to decide what we want on our agenda, what is the focus that the mayor or council wants to have for the purposes of putting together the agenda, because we may have a much broader focus than a city that's been doing this every year for 10 years.
Sure.
We haven't ever narrowed it down.
Isn't there a line item in the budget for, what is it, $1,000 or $5,000?
Council expenses,
And that, how much is it?
5,000.
So that would come from there. Good.
Memory serves correctly, the account was fairly full last time I checked.
I unfortunately did not write down the cities, so it's by memory. I know he's done Balcones Heights because that's where we got the name. Amarillo, I'm pretty positive. He had cities all over the state that he's assisted. He listed off like 10 or 12 different cities and at least one county.
One of the facilitators that I talked to specifically said that he likes to meet with council members individually. That way he can get an unbiased idea of what they want to do. And if this gentleman's willing to do that, I would appreciate that.
Sure, I'll mention that to him if we think that that would be important.
I don't think it could hurt. Okay. If nobody else has any other comments, then we'll proceed on because we still have quite a few items. Next, we have discussed the Commons Master Landscape Design and Lighting Options and initiate a Commons Foundation to support and host park improvement fundraisers. Mr. Vanderwally.
Okay, this is partially mine. I think it's probably more Councilman McGlynn's in that she was the one that came up with an idea for coming up with a master plan for the Commons, which I think is a great idea, and perhaps some type of a foundation that would not only fund but help plan and so on and so forth. This all came about based on the lights in the Commons, and so we were told to come up with a solution in a relatively short order, and the quickest one we come up with was CPS, but that did not meet the kind of the character of the Commons and what we wanted to put forth with regards to the image of the Commons. So in the meantime, we are, after meeting with Councilman Trevino, Councilman McGlynn, and some of the folks from CPS, the plan is that Rick is going to install some kind of temporary lighting out there that's a little bit nicer, a little more permanent than what he's got out there now. And in your council packet, you should have kind of some pictures. If I can get to the right tab here. Of some of the possible lighting options with prices, and I just kind of wanted to get kind of your opinion on it. The first one is a LED light that is 19,500 lumens, so it's pretty bright, and it can be mounted on any street sign post. So this, again, is just for the temporary solution. We put 5 or 6 of these up in the Commons to improve the safety and security out there, probably focusing more along the back area. The front part of the Commons gets pretty good ambient light from the street, but the backside is pretty dark, and it's also a little spooky back there with the bushes and whatnot and the little creek that runs through there, so, or the drainage ditch. So this would be one option, would be this is the brightest option. It certainly doesn't have a lot of curb appeal. It's more utilitarian in nature. If you turn the page over in your packet, these are just a couple of ones we pulled off of the Home Depot website. You know, we have the Acorn lights that are out on the front of the property that are on the street out there. They're a decorative light. These somewhat match that, particularly the top one. It's an 85-inch high light post, so, you know, it's roughly 7 feet high and has 300-watt lights in it, so it's a 300-watt light. When it says, for the first one, it says it's 150 watt, that's a 150-watt LED light, and that is more equivalent to about a 450-watt worth of regular incandescent light. The Home Depot light would be a max of about 300 watts, 3 100-watt bulbs. Or we could, if we wanted to kind of go with more of the green theme, stick to the LED lights, and then I believe they're about 16 watts each is what you would put in there, or maybe up to 30 watts each that would match the 100. So it'd save a little bit on energy, cost a little more for the light bulb up front, but give a nicer, wider light. So that's just kind of the temporary solution, and kind of, I'll turn it over now to, what I'd like is to kind of get your ideas on that and your thoughts on, you know, which route you would favor. This is not a vote. This is just, I'd like your opinion on it, because whatever we put up there, we're going to live with probably for another year at least, maybe 2, until we can get something put in that the foundation would approve.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderwally.
I do have a comment or a question about the 2 from Home Depot. While I love that they are fancy, that the poles are fancy, my concern with those is that we're getting into having to pour pads that they can be bolted to. If we go to something like that versus a pole that we just bury in concrete in the ground. So I worry that even though it's pretty, we end up junking up the commons with a bunch of light pole pads that we have to figure out where we want them, and then they have no purpose besides the pads. So we're almost chasing our tail with that. But so I guess that's my first question, is that type of pole is going to need to be mounted to something, not...
Yes, it would. So we'd have to put some kind of a concrete base down in order to attach it. But you could just do either one of them. Either pole is going to require some concrete. The ones on the front page is probably just going to be poured in the ground and then covered up. So it would be just the pole coming up out of the ground. You could pour the concrete that these posts attach to from Home Depot flush to the ground, and then you can remove them and pull them out of there whenever the time comes, whenever you put the actual lights in.
Well, and I did a little bit of research for other different kinds of lighting, and there were several different, since we're now looking at something that's a little bit more appealing in height, everything from Lamps Plus to Menards to Wayfair and a couple of the other online resources. I think we can come up with something that will blend with the Acorn lights. But as part of the discussion, because I know that Mrs. Scott and Mr. Gregory have not had the benefit of the meeting that we had with CPS, I did want them to know a little bit more about what the actual cost of that CPS lighting was going to be. The original proposal that they gave us was a $3,000 down payment and then monthly payments of $225 a month for a 3-year term. Well, what we discovered in the meeting with the representative from CPS is that 3-year term turns into another 3-year term at $225, which turns into another 3-year term for $225 a month, into another 3-year term for 30 years. So for 30 years, they amortize the cost of those light poles out 30 years. So it ends up being something like $81,000, which if we were lighting a highway or something with 25 or 20-foot poles, that would be great, but we don't need 20-foot poles in the commons. And it was, so for full disclosure of everyone having the benefit of that meeting, and he was lovely to deal with and was very open and honest about everything that you get. Of course, they do all the maintenance, and they're responsible for all of that. But at the end of the term, if you decided you wanted to get rid of the lights, what do you say about that?
The gentleman said that they would take everything out, or we'd have to buy it.
Yeah, you either have to buy out the rest of the term, or they take all the lighting out completely.
To include the cabling.
Correct.
To include, because it's underground cable. And I would point out, Councilman Glenn, inside your package, you actually have the actual quote. We were working off rough estimate numbers, and it really is it's $167 a month, not $225. And it was $1,500 or $1,600, I can't remember exactly which, to pull the power off of the transformer, which we're going to pay, which regardless of any system we put in there, ultimately, in order to get enough light out there, we're going to have to pull power off of the pole out there. And we're going to pay somewhere in that neighborhood to pull that, to have them install the power, install the meter, and then we would pay for electricity. Now, granted, it wouldn't be $167 a month for the lights in the commons, but there will be some fee associated with it for the lights that we do install, because the $167 a month also pays for the electricity.
Where, you know, for years, the Women's Club, go back about 12 years ago, 10 or 12 years ago. I don't know, memory gets better the further back I go. Wanted to put a gazebo there, and they've always seemed to have the Commons as their little pet project, which I think is great, because they've done a whole bunch of things. Do we need lighting to be permanent in lieu of the fact we have Fiesta Castle Hills, and we have other things there that encourage structures not to be there except for trees and bushes and grass? Do we need this lighting, and if we do need it, where would you put permanent lighting?
Well, to answer your question and to give you a little more insight into our meeting, this is a longer-term solution, but it's not a long-term solution. Right now, there's an issue. We want to make something a little more permanent and avoid having extension cords out there. So this is, like I said, a little longer-term solution, but the long-term plan is to sit down and to design, and I think that's where Councilmember McLean has, you know, stated that we need to have a design going forward so we can know what exactly we want to do.
You know, maybe that depending on how we want to use the commons, that having lighting in the middle is where we need it, but we don't know because we have a big grassy field, and we have a lot of residents who want playgrounds, they want this, that, and the other. So I feel like we've kind of hit that point in the road where we've got to decide how we make the commons useful. But to me, I mean, that's where the big flag came up. Why are we spending huge amounts of money for CPS to put poles in that are very permanent and very visible when we haven't even figured out how we want to use the commons? I mean, it's clear we need safety, that we obviously need permanent safety lighting. I mean, the extension cords are certainly not what we need.
My question would be, why wouldn't you establish a subcommittee to the Master Planning Commission that they would come up with a plan for the commons then? At least some kind of conceptual plans that you could turn over to an engineer or a designer, an architect that could come out and say, this is what you need, this is what you're telling me you need, but roll it into that same effort for the Master Planning Commission.
Well, I do think you must involve the Women's Club. You must involve the Women's Club, because they've done Legion's work through the decades around here, and I think they've got to be involved to a significant extent. I really do. Now, are you all members of the Women's Club? Well, there you are. I mean, I think this has got to be a community-wide thing, and just not 4 or 5 people sitting together and said, this is what we're going to do.
Well, and this sort of goes back to when Mayor Howell had a family roundtable way back in January on a really rainy, cold Saturday morning, and we sat in the back around Frank's table with our families and talked about what families want in Castle Hills. And so I think certainly if we can come up with something that's a few $1,000s to put some lighting that will provide some safety and a little bit of light out there for the interim, I'm just cautious about spending too much money when we need to do exactly what you're saying. Yep. And see what our community wants.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, make the lighting not permanent, semi-permanent or mobile enough so you can have a flexible plan.
So in the meantime, is there anything in this packet that you would see on the temporary permanent lighting that would be a showstopper for anybody here?
To Ms. McLean's point, I think that going with the first example would be a little bit easier to just set the pole in concrete and not have to pour a pad and have the bolts sticking out and all that.
To be fair, it's kind of...
That's my personal preference.
Are we talking about
The LED one, it sort
This
of
first
has that.
example or these examples?
The
We're talking
first
about
one.
this. Yeah, I like,
It's intriguing to me. It's not beautiful, but
It appears industrial yet functional.
Right.
That's what we need. We need a functional light to provide for safety issues that's not a permanent lifelong fixture or a 30-year fixture there that can then be dug up and moved once a plan is put together for the commons and an actual design is put together. So I personally have no problem with something that's very industrial and functional. Let's go with function over fashion.
Okay,
And cost as well.
so here's what I would propose that we're gonna do, and, like I said, we're not voting, but this is what my intent would be. It would be to buy one, install it, and then everybody can go take a look at it, and they can say whether they love it, hate it, or,
one of
It's okay.
each.
Were these
One
black?
pole
oh,
and
just,
one of these?
just one of this that you're
These
looking at
things?
right here. Yeah,
Is that-
so,
was
because
it-
this is Amazon.com, and I think I've got the price on there. They're $250 for each light. Now, it's LED, it should last until you come up with a permanent solution. But to install one, see what kind of light we actually get out of it, we're gonna put it at a height where Rick and his guys can get to it with their tallest ladder. So if it needs to be changed, we don't have to go rent a piece of equipment to get it changed. And we'll mount it up as high as we can get it to give us as much light as possible. And we'll put it somewhere in the darkest part of the commons and see what we think.
So the lighting is meant not for, it's not a decorative thing, it's a safety thing.
It's safety. So this is really driven by, if you've tracked the news, there's been a couple of attacks in Harburger Park. Now, we're not Harburger Park here, granted, but it is a pretty spooky, dark corner back there, and I think we need to do it just for the safety aspect. Even when we're having big events here, you know, you got little kids running all over the place out there, it would be nice to have some light in those back corners so, you know, nothing nefarious happens.
Mr. Brennan, I noticed on the contract, they said the lights are from dusk to dawn. Does the city, and other parks aren't like this, does the city want to have the park illuminated at 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning?
I think for safety you do.
But who's gonna be in the park at 3 o'clock in the morning?
The only reason they would be there is for nefarious purposes, I would think, and I'd want it lit up, so as our police officers drive by, they can make sure that no one is out there doing something that they shouldn't be doing. But if it's dark, and they drive by, they may be able to shine their spotlight out there, but they could miss something. But if it's lit up, you know, I think it's a deterrent to people being out there doing things they shouldn't be doing at 1, 2, or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Well, that went to something else we discussed in the meeting with the CPS fella. We asked him about what other parks do, and he said, well, San Antonio does all their own lighting in the parks. That's why you don't see the industrial CPS, you know, street light. You see more decorative things because San Antonio has chosen to do their own lighting in their parks. And so, just so that, you know, you have the benefit of that part of the conversation. Mr. Vanderwally, was this black? It appears from this that it was a black fixture.
Yeah, it is a black fixture, so, and you can put whatever color pole you want to put with it, so I would just assume just paint a black pole to match it. Rick will probably use his sign stock and then paint it to match.
Does it have the dusk to dark sensors or the
Photocell.
Yeah,
photocell?
In the past, over where the red brick wall is, there used to be gas lighting for those lamps that used to go into that part of the city. And Mike Shands looked into exchanging that and make them into solar lighting. Would solar lighting be better than LED?
So I pitched that to the committee too, and I also found a Spanish fixture that does not just light, but it does wind. It's got a little wind turbine on it and 2 solar. So if it's not sunny, you have wind. I think that to me, when I started looking at those, that's what I would love to have. But I feel like those are much more expensive long-term options to where we have to have decided what we're doing with the commons. And I don't think we can make a decision about that fast enough to address the problem. But I love the idea of solar lights. I don't see why we can't be that city in San Antonio that has embraced, you know, not having to pay for our street lights and whatnot, because I do understand that in doing my research, I read that streetlights are usually one of the highest electric expenses for a city. And so the more we can avoid that as we put lighting in, I think the better in the long run.
How does this affect? CPS made a great point when they gave us back a lot of this money, that the federal government was mandating a carbon footprint that we had to get up to. Is that still in place, or is the federal government sort of dropped that?
No, the city of San Antonio, it's all about air attainment, and the city of San Antonio is subject to that, and I cannot think of who did the legislation, I'm drawing a blank right now, but the city of San Antonio was not going to meet its air attainment goals, which is why the CPS and these different, and the city has been pushing various policies to try to reduce their carbon footprint and their carbon emissions. In fact, they have an anti-idling policy in the city of San Antonio. You cannot leave your vehicle running and walk away from it. You have to turn it off and walk away. So like if you're out doing public works work or something, they have a time limit on it.
Is this going to affect our carbon footprint that may hurt us in the future? It seems to me solar would lower the carbon.
I think what we could do on the solar side, if you've got a source, we could, here's my concern is reliability in a safety, in something you're putting in for safety and security. I think if we wanted to look at a couple solar options, if we're going to mount this pole out there, we could mount a couple, if we're making decisions in the future on it, if somebody's got a good idea, we could mount a couple of those lights and let's see how they perform. My experience with solar is it's not as bright, it peters out before daylight, and if you give a few cloudy days, you don't have light. So that's the concern. This is for safety, and you can't jeopardize safety. So I would go with a hardwired system. But if somebody thinks there's a Spanish system that has solar, wind, and thermonuclear capabilities, we could do that.
Well, my concern with what we're looking at is we are looking at residential solar lighting, which is going to be woefully insufficient for what we want as a city. What we have to be looking at is the more industrial solar options, and there, in my looking online, there are many cities in Florida that have used solar lighting in their airports and other places along their city streets. And so there are cities in the U.S. that are doing this, not just in far-flung places across the globe, but those are going to be more expensive options because they have better solar technology. I don't think that our Home Depot solar lights are they are not gonna function the way we want them to. Although I think that that's something that, definitely needs to be planned into it. We've got a huge roof on the top of this building that could hold solar panels.
Well, that's something I've been pushing for 10 years, that we go to solar energy in the city, but it never gets anywhere. Anyway.
Okay, well, moving forward, because we still have several more. Next up, we have discussed the letter of engagement to conduct the 2017 fiscal year audit from Armstrong, Vaughn and Associates, Certified Public Accountants. Mr. Vanderwally.
And this is another thing we want to put on the consent agenda, basically to just tee us up for the audit next year, to do a letter of engagement with Armstrong and Vaughn and Associates, who have done our audits now for the last 5 years that I'm aware of, and maybe even more than that. Councilman, you could probably speak to that, how long they've done it. We've been very pleased with the service that Armstrong, Vaughn and Associates has rendered to us. They've been extremely helpful in the absence of a finance officer because they understand, our financial system and our financial accounts probably better than we do. So we've called them in on multiple occasions in the recent past, and they're always been Johnny on the spot and very helpful. And like I said, they have a very thorough understanding already of our finances. So this will go on the consent agenda just for a letter of engagement to go with Armstrong, Vaughn and Associates, unless someone has some other consideration that they want to bring forward.
I do have a question. If do they rotate through the CPA that's assigned to the audit? As I know, Debbie Frazier was the lady that came and did the presentation at our first council meeting on the audit for last year. Do they rotate through CPAs, or do they have the same person do it every year?
Debbie is our representative, and then she has several other accountants that work underneath her that help her as she goes through the audit. And she had a couple of young accountants come out and help us when they went through the audit. So she was she has a staff that works for her, but she is our representative.
Well, one of the best practices things that they talked about at TML in the audit section, and correct me if I'm wrong, was that if you use the same accounting firm for many years in a row, well, first they said, don't, get quotes and change around so that you've got different eyes looking at your books. But they said if you don't change, to make sure that you rotate through and have somebody different in charge of your audit, just so that you've got a different set of eyes. Not saying that there's anything bad that's happened, but just as a best practice for a city to not always have the same people looking at the books. Am I remembering that correct?
That's what I also remember from the same meeting, attended the same conference. And they did suggest that you change it up so you have fresh eyes constantly looking at those numbers and possibly, if there is something to catch it.
For what that's worth, that may be worth looking into, Mr. Vanderwall.
Oh, yeah, we'll definitely, I'll ask the question. I have a pretty good relationship with Debbie, and I can call her, and I think it could put it in a way that wouldn't be offensive, to say, look, there's nothing personal here. We're not doing this for any kind of cause other than we would like a fresh set of eyes based on recommendations by TML, that if we have the same firm auditing us, then we should probably rotate CPAs so that we get a fresh set of eyes on our books and have that discussion with her anyway. So,
I'd like to ask Ms. McLendon Scott. We had an auditor for a long while, and it proved to be inadequate. And we switched to these people, and they seem to be doing a thorough job. I was thinking just the other way, that I've seen the cost of this audit go up every year, that we might offer somebody a 3-year contract to be renewed at the end of every 3rd year. I think it's good to have somebody who understands what's going on in your city. Fresh eyes is a nice concept, but for a small city, I wonder whether it really is that important. For San Antonio, I can understand that, because you never know what's going on in San Antonio. But for a little town of 4,000 people, do we really need to constantly rotate or constantly change the firms we're using to do an audit if we've been satisfied with the firm that has done the audit in the past?
Well, they didn't necessarily say we had to change the firm. They just suggested if the firm has multiple partners or multiple accountants, that you ask a different one within the same firm to handle the audit each year. So they do have that record. They can go back and say, I found this, can you explain to me what happened here or what's going on here? But it's just giving you a fresh eyes within the same firm.
So if that's the case, can't we come to this firm and say, we'll give you a 3-year contract if you charge us X for every year for the next 3 years? Might save us some money.
Well, I think it's worth asking.
It's something that whether you might not want to do it, or you might want to do it, but that cost seems to be going up every single year.
So I think, Councilman, you probably have a good idea there. I would recommend, if you're going to do that, though, that you wait and do it after this audit is complete, and do it like in the July timeframe, put out the RFPs, June, July timeframe, after the auditing is all done and we've got the reports in. Simply because at this late date, if we did that, they're already starting to gear up for audits, and they're not going to, Anyway, my recommendation would be we move forward, and I will have that conversation with Debbie Frazier, and then if council wants to consider putting out for multi-year agreement to do audits, then that would be something good to pick up probably in the late spring, early summer next year.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, and please stress it's nothing personal. It's just TML recommendation, yeah. I think she's done a fine job and very happy.
All right, next we have a discussion on the Walkability Committee. Ms. McLinn.
It never started. We authorized it and it never started, so we've got to figure out something to do with it. I think it's important, but for some reason they were never contacted or were never met.
What is the walkability? I know you showed me something about 2 or 3 months ago about paths and this and that. What is this walkability committee supposed to be doing?
So there was Alamo Area MPO at the farmer's market last August a year ago, 2016. They did a walk, and so they went around the whole city, and they created a walkability plan, and it was about a 20-page report that they did for the city of Castle Hills on how to improve our walkability. And it included things like sidewalks, potential places for bike and hike and bike trails, and suggestions regarding crosswalks and other things to make our city more walker-friendly or bicycle-friendly. And so really it was a committee to go back and look at that and see what we could do and what kind of grants we could get to accomplish the goals.
So, so personally, one of the things that I've been working on is a crosswalk that I think would be beneficial on Military for a variety of reasons. Before I would present anything, I'd like to gather the information, and part of that is you have to put together any kind of grant that you go after or any kind of project that you like to present. Ideally, you're going to have all the information as far as pricing and stuff like that. VIA is going to be installing a Hawk system by Antonian, and
What system?
it's called a Hawk system.
What is that?
It's basically a crosswalk pedestrian system that you press a button and it illuminates the lights to let the drivers know that there's somebody going to be crossing there. So it's my intent that as VIA goes along and installs it, I'll be able to use their numbers to model them for purposes of presenting them to the council for future projects. But to Ms. McLean's point, I do believe that there's other stuff that we need to look at as well besides crosswalks.
Where would these grants be coming from? Federal government or state government or individual businesses? CPS?
The Alamo Area MPO has got grants. They do 80% walkability grants. So we spend $100,000, they give us $80,000 back.
Really?
Texas Parks and Wildlife has also got an 80% walkability grant. So we put in a walking trail along the railroad track behind Antonian, down behind McGimpsey. You could get 80% back. If you have vehicular trails as well, there was another type of grant that you could get through the Texas Parks and Wildlife.
Yeah, and bicycle trails also
Yeah.
gave you a different type of grant money. And I know personally, I would love to be able to get around the city without having to use my vehicle. So I think it,
So with regards to the Alamo Area MPO, we're turning in RPS Klotz's, I just got them from late yesterday afternoon, proposals to do the streets that are identified in the Alamo Area MPO plan, West Avenue, as well as up Honeysuckle, down Linwood, onto Roletto to Northwest Military, and putting in projects that would add a bicycle lane and a sidewalk all the way down the length of Honeysuckle, for instance, to the Castle Hills Elementary, put in sidewalks around the school, and that sort of thing. So that's already in the works. If y'all remember, maybe 2 council meetings ago, y'all approved for us to work with them to submit something to the Alamo Area MPO. So that's due this Friday, and I've seen the draft and sent it back to RPS Klotz. So.
To finish up, I think that we should definitely work with that committee and see what we can do to make sure it keeps on going.
Is this another one that should fall under the Master Planning Commission?
No, it's not. There's too much, I think, in my opinion, I think this is something it's not completely separate, but it's a very specific issue that we've already established a committee. It was voted on, we gave them a timeline, and they were never contacted to meet. And so that was a ball that was dropped last summer regarding this committee. They were supposed to have reported in October, so we could have applied for January grants.
This past summer?
Yes.
Who's on this
This was
committee?
all,
That's the first I've heard of a walkability committee being
Who's on the
appointed.
committee?
it was Agdel Rivera and, yeah, let me see. Let me find my
I
notes.
vaguely recall something like that. I want to recall it because Amy showed me her telephone about it.
Was that in a council meeting?
It was at a council meeting, we
at a
approved
council
it.
meeting, we approved it, and the mayor, I believe, appointed
I don't
several
remember this.
members, and
There'll be
there was
specific.
supposed to be an October report, so we could go ahead and apply for January grant.
I know, I knew we talked about the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department grants, but I don't remember a walkability committee being established, but I could be completely wrong on that, so.
In the interest of time, I would say that it's something we need to reevaluate and determine when they can move on. Next on the agenda, we have the agenda item number 10, discussion on the Microsoft Tech Summit and future participation.
Number 12.
I'm sorry, 12, yes. Ms. McGlynn.
Okay, I don't know if anybody else gets these emails from Microsoft, but I get emails from Microsoft at my city address. And I got one, and I bit, and I sat for almost 2 hours with my jaw dropped at all the really cool electronic things out there for cities to make our lives easier. And I missed the first part of this particular tech summit, but it talked about everything from government for the digital future to this personality chip that Los Angeles has that brings digital assistance to the people of LA, to the city of Redmond, Washington, and how they have streamlined their financial management, city of Houston and their disaster-proof plan, and how they were able to get through Hurricane Harvey, like meeting by meeting every day as things were, they had these triage meetings every day with people from around the world for Microsoft that helped brainstorm what to do with all the 311 calls and how to deal with the volume and how could they shove them onto an online like message board type thing where they could get answers quickly to questions, to empowering people with disabilities through digital accessibility and inclusion. And that's just something as simple as the way your website is designed, making it easily readable, or what we discovered at the Louvre in Paris. You could take your phone and you could take this little Google thing and you could like take a picture of it and it would tell you everything that about a statue, translate it for you. And so all of this stuff is are things that Microsoft offers. It had some stuff about water utilities, which I didn't really listen to too much since we don't have one. And then it had a conversation about clouds and using the cloud for city purposes. And so all of that, I have links that I can, it basically says, send to all of your colleagues on council so they can be informed. So I have links to some of those to view it if anyone is interested. But as I sat through it, I realized that this was stuff that maybe Rob or our IT people should be paying attention to, and not me, because I use a computer, I love a computer, but I don't really care how it works. I mean, that's just not in my realm of what I care about. I like that they work and they do all these things, but how they do it is beyond my expertise. So it was interesting that Microsoft is so invested in helping customize applications for cities. So.
We have a technology fund. Remember how much is in the technology fund? We got money in the technology fund.
Well, I mean, honestly, I think maybe sending that link to Rob and give him an opportunity to explore it and see if there's anything that he thinks that would be beneficial to the city. I mean, I don't know, or you want to send it out to the other, have Mr. Vanderwall send it out to other council members as well so that we can.
We can send it to Rob. Again, Rob is our IT people. So he is it. We do have Louis that's, IT savvy and likes that stuff, and Johnny Siemens, and they would probably be good to send it to them too, to kind of look at and see if there's anything we can cherry pick out of there. But this is one of those that I would say that, as Rob has been up to his elbows in alligators for the past couple months with things that we've levied on him. So, but I'm sure this is in his bailiwick. He would probably love to sit there and watch these videos and see if there's anything we can glean from it.
Is anybody else interested in these? Because they also sent me one. Thank you for attending. Here's some other things you might want to watch, including cyber hacking, like a hack fest, and security in a day workshop, and some other stuff, which if anybody's interested, I'll send it to Kurt and he can send it out if you want to click through it, or.
Yeah, please do.
Okay.
Yeah, please send all the links, because for all we know, it could connect up with what Louis discussed earlier with our online permit applications, and that particular application, if it's through Microsoft, it could link to even more and more and more things that could make living in the city of Castle Hills easier.
It's definitely worth a second look. Lastly, we have discussion on the status of projects assigned to council members. Ms. McGlynn.
think I've talked about most of the things that I've been working on. I had not done the employee survey for us to look at. That is something that I would like to have for us to be able to review before we have our retreat. And I also have been staring at our organizational plan for the city and how our, just how our people work and what their job assignments are. And I feel like that I'm working on something that we can discuss when we get to our retreat, because I feel like everybody wears 2 or 3 hats, and I know that we have residents that come and say, we've got too many employees, we don't need any more employees, but what I see is that either we don't have good job descriptions, or we really don't have enough employees, or we have them tooled wrong, or labeled wrong, or listed wrong, or something that we need to work on from an organizational standpoint. So those are just some little other projects that I'm working on, besides working with Minnie and Mrs. Scott on the concept of a concierge garbage service or valet garbage service. We've met with Rick and talked with him about his concerns and ideas, and feel like we've got a good idea of what would work for him and what he would support from the public works standpoint, and so that's something else that's on my plate. I met with Nora. She has been tasked with making sure that we get that finalized. It sat after the meeting where we discussed hours. It sat and was not acted upon. I followed up on it after I got back from vacation, and Nora is now my point person, and I'm working with her to make sure that it's to the point where people have to take some online training before we can submit the application. And so those people have been selected, and we should be working on that.
Okay, if nobody else has any more comments? So I will, no further business, I invite a motion to adjourn. We got a first by Mr. Gregory,
If you need a second, I'll second it.
second by Mrs. Scott, all in favor? Motion passes, meeting will be called to end at 8:34.